distinguished faculty in residence for the College of Ed in our Department of Educational Leadership. And I want to welcome you all to the Racial Justice Series that's sponsored by the College of Education. Today's installment is called Conquering Barriers, the Burden and Beauty of Black Women Educators. I want to take a moment and begin by acknowledging and condemning the racist, domestic terrorist acts that took place in Atlanta, Georgia this week. And I want to make it very clear that this was a domestic terrorist attack. This was a hate crime. And we know that our brothers and sisters of Asian descent are suffering right now, and we suffer with them. We must put a stop to anti-Asian hate and violence. And we stand with our Asian and Asian American brothers and sisters. So I want to start with that very clear message. The remarkable Mary Baca Bethune once said, "Next to God, we are indebted to women, first for life itself, then for making it worth living." Also, in the same vein, the Honorable Nelson Mandela said, "Education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world." Therefore, challenging these collective spirits in this particular conversation, we want to walk this journey to be world changers. And if we've learned anything from our recent history, we know that when Black women lead, we succeed. Not some of us succeed, all of us succeed. Black women are uniquely equipped and qualified to continue leading us on our journey toward freedom. And as a friend, Khalif Boyd, said recently, Black women have this unmatched ability to carry the burdens of others, fight oppression, support their communities, and eloquently dominate a room while fighting the double-edged sword that pierces them daily, which are anti-Blackness and anti-female sentiments. So today, we're fortunate to hear from 3 women in the field of education who are doing this work. But before we hear from these phenomenal women, please allow me to introduce Ms. Elise Martin. Elise is a student ambassador for the College of Education. She's a senior liberal arts major who will be graduating this spring. And so Elise will introduce our moderator, who is Mrs. Jennifer Booker. Elise, take it away.
Dr. Glass. So today our moderator is Jennifer R. Prudhomme Booker, MBA, Senior E-commerce Manager and Community Advocate. Jennifer Prudhomme Booker was raised in the city of Artesia, where her family has lived for over 30 years. Both Jennifer and her sister, educator Paula Hammond, attended schools in the ABC Unified School District and received their undergraduate degrees from California State University, Long Beach College of Health and Human Services. Today, Mrs. Booker creatively and professionally serves the growing digital world of retail by lending her business knowledge and design experience to enterprise e-commerce development, along with diversity and inclusion initiatives. She co-manages the development of commercial mobile apps and B2B digital innovations for a Fortune 300 company as a senior e-commerce manager. As head of merchandising for Branded Online, she managed and curated on-site experiences for Halston, Diamonds International, and Ben Sherman. As the first African-American senior e-commerce manager of fashion and beauty for Rakuten USA, Mrs. Booker led the launch of the redesigned Rakuten.com fashion and beauty department, accompanied by the largest U.S. fashion campaign for Japan's leading internet company and the 3rd largest e-commerce company in the world. Jennifer holds a Master's of Business Administration from Columbia Southern University in Alabama and 2 Bachelor of Arts degrees from California State University, Long Beach in merchandising and design. Mrs. Booker's experience with nonprofit and community organizations is diverse in nature. Her service history includes an array of community organizations and advocacy, including the ABC Unified School District Diversity, Equity, and Unity Board Advisory Committee, Whitney High School Foundation for Educational Excellence, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, One Step Initiative Study Abroad Education for Undeserved Youth, STEM Camp, Young Women's Empowerment Conference with U.S. Congressman Alan Lowenthal, and the inaugural President's Forum on International Human Rights at California State University, Long Beach. She is a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and founding member of the Whitney High School Black Alumni Association. So please welcome Mrs. Booker.
Thank you, Elise, for the warm welcome. Thank you, Dr. Stephen Glass. My alma mater, Cal State University, Long Beach College of Education. Thank you for creating a space and a platform for today's topic. And prior to introducing our dynamic panelists, I would love to honor a name that you mentioned, Dr. Glass, earlier for Women's History Month, and Mary McLeod Bethune, educator, philanthropist, humanitarian, womanist. Think of who she, if you envision her now, who she is and who she was, being born in 1875 and what she was up against as a Black woman, a devout educator, an advocate for students, negotiated community development with major enterprises in the early 1900s, and was a direct senior advisor to Franklin D. Roosevelt as a Black woman in the early 1900s. And I think of her in the energy that resonates from her memory, and knowing and acknowledging for the shoulders of the ancestors on which we stand, the energy, the legacy of which the three women we will be so fortunate to hear from today. I'm honored to introduce three women that embody that legacy, and that's Deborah Logan, Dr. Christina Wise, and Megan Mitchell. And I will introduce them as a follow-up to that legacy that I just mentioned with Mrs. Bethune. Deborah Logan, Mrs. Deborah Logan, is a Christian wife, mother, grandmother, educator, retired educator, but still educates, all right? A lifelong learner. She was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, but raised in Los Angeles and Compton, California. She graduated from Dominguez High School, located in Compton, in 1969. She was bused to Dominguez as part of the district's integration program. Being the first in her immediate family to attend college, she had worked to help pay for her education and, along with a best friend, commuted to Cal State University, Long Beach. She received her Bachelor's of Arts in Speech Communication English in 1973 and received a teaching credential. Years later, after marrying and having two children, she went on to earn an MA in education. She retired after 37 years in the educational field, and she always wanted to give back to her community. So, as her first job of teaching English at Roosevelt Junior High School in Compton Unified, a school that she also attended, she was released from that position due to budget cuts and spent the remainder of her educational career thereon from ABC Unified School District and retired. So undoubtedly there was something greater in store for her after that budget cut, and she did phenomenal work for ABC Unified. Dr. Christina Wise has been involved in educating students for over 2 decades. Education was instilled in her by her mother, who went to college during a time where it was uncommon for women to do so. Her mother returned to her hometown of Montgomery, Alabama, and began teaching and reading at her church, which impacted the lives of many. Seeing this, Dr. Wise became a passionate believer that education can change lives and communities. Dr. Wise is the director of secondary schools at ABC Unified. She earned her doctorate in educational leadership at the University of Southern California and holds a Master of Arts and Masters of Science from Pepperdine University. She completed, however, her undergraduate work at Cal State University, Long Beach. Her experience includes working in 3 school districts as both a teacher and an administrator in the ABC Unified School District. She has served as an administrator at Ross Middle School, Tetzlaff Middle School, and most recently as the principal of Garr High School in Cerritos. She has been recognized for her hard work, earning the State of California Principal of the Year in 2015 and Region 14 Principal of the Year Award from the Association of California School Administrators, as well as being a National Principal of the Year finalist in 2016 through the National Association of Secondary Principals. Dr. Wise resides in Los Angeles County with her husband of 25 years and her 2 children. Megan Mitchell earned her Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Africana Studies from California State University, Long Beach. Her Master of Education in Student Affairs, from the University of California, Los Angeles, and New Media and E-Learning certification from California State University, Los Angeles. Megan holds her multiple subject teaching credential, history single subject credential, and single subject authorization in math and English. Megan wholeheartedly believes that she was always destined to become a teacher. As a lifelong learner, Megan is inspired by the young humans that she teaches and continues to learn how to best serve their educational needs daily. With over a decade of experience in education, she considers herself privileged to work with over 300 diverse students from different cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds and a variety of abilities and skill sets. Megan currently teaches 5th grade for ABC Unified School District. Welcome, ladies. And again, an esteemed pleasure and honor to moderate this panel discussion today. One of the aims of the College of Education at Cal State University Long Beach is to inspire and motivate Black, Indigenous persons of color, and obviously the Asian, American, Pacific Islander community, diverse communities, all right, to consider teaching as a career goal. When did you, and I'll start with Dr. Wise, when did you, Dr. Wise, first decide to become an educator, and who inspired you to accept the call?
I love to tell this story about my family and where we come in education. I'm not so sure if anyone's familiar with Montgomery, Alabama back in the early 1940s and 1950s, but there were really only 2 options for women. They could either be a wife, which means they could either marry or marry well, or they could be a housekeeper in Montgomery, Alabama in the 40s. And my grandmother decided that that was not going to be good enough for her granddaughters. So she was an owner of the shop and the store, which most of the people in the community shopped. And so her premise is that all of her children would work inside of the store to serve the community, but that they would save all of their resources to make sure that every granddaughter of hers went to Alabama State University and to become teachers. And so I have a plethora of aunts, as I call them, aunties, that are educators. And what we were able to find in this investment, not only did she change the trajectory of her granddaughters, but also that community, because the only thing that they had to do is to promise to come back and teach reading to the community. So not only did they work the 10-month cycle, but they came back into the community resource centers on weekends and on holidays and in summer programs and vacation Bible school to ensure that the descendants of Montgomery, Alabama on that side of town would know how to read. And I have to tell you, as the 50s and the 60s and 70s, you could see the progress of homes that did not have restrooms or homes that were not in the best living conditions to change that community. And so we believe that it is the ancestry or legacy that my grandmother, Sarah Bibb, put into her granddaughters that really perpetuated an educational strand for not just her family, but also the community.
And what a blessing, just the stepping stone that she created. You mentioned even your aunties, Dr. Wise, and hearing your story, just being encircled by women that were in that field, but also having that stepping stone that was started and uprooted by your grandmother is an amazing story. How about you, Mrs. Logan? Who allowed you or inspired you to accept the call?
I think I was always a teacher. I remember teaching my little brothers. I'm the oldest. And so I would make them sit in front of a mirror because we didn't have chalkboards. And I used ivory soap and I would teach my little brothers. And so that started my career. I also remember kind teachers. I remember my first grade teacher and my kindergarten teacher who were inspirational. But there was one teacher in middle school, her name was Miss Davis. The first time I had seen, once I came to California, a Black teacher, and she was a young Black teacher, and she taught English. And she motivated us in that classroom, this is what you're going to do. So I think I've always kind of was going to become a teacher. And, I also came up in the time during in high school that we always knew we were going to do something. We were all going to go to college. All of my friends went to college. We were all going to college. We didn't know exactly what we were going to do, but I always knew I was going to teach.
And what I love about your story as well is you said you didn't know what you were going to do, but if you remember everyone, even her background, the time that, Mrs. Logan was in high school, 1969, there was a lot happening politically
60s,
and
oh,
economically. The 60s, right? My mom also was at, a high school in Compton, Centennial High School during 1960.
Oh, okay.
There was a lot happening during that time, but love again hearing that you were inspired by yet another woman educator in your story, Mrs. Logan. Thank you for that. And Megan, who brought education into your calling? I know you, so I already know a huge part of what that is, but please, if you can, share with our audience who inspired you to accept the call.
So I ran from the call to be a teacher, but my mother, who always knew she wanted to be a teacher, when she went to Dominguez Hills, throughout her whole life, she knew that she wanted to be a teacher. I was not the same. However, I was the daughter of an educator. So my mom's full passion, still now, even as a retired teacher, was to teach. She loves children. She loves education. She knows the power that education provides people and marginalized groups specifically to uplift themselves and to empower others. And so whether it was Sunday school, whether it was vacation Bible school, whether it was being dragged in the summer to my mom's classroom to help set up bulletin boards, whether it was after school when I was in high school, having to walk over to her school and work with her students, like my mom made sure that I didn't have a choice but to be a teacher. And I say that because I did not want to be a teacher. I did not go to school to be a teacher. Like I did everything possible to do anything that was not teaching. But when I think about it, in high school, all of my friends, their first jobs was working at Knott's Berry Farm. Mine was working at a daycare. In college, I would turn up on Fridays and Saturdays, but made sure that I was at home or back at my dorm in enough time to refresh and everything, because I taught Sunday school on Sunday morning. When I graduated college and I was kind of in between trying to figure out what I wanted to do, because I decided I didn't want to go to law school, I then worked at a nonprofit for after school programs. So pretty much with the exception of interning and what I did right after college, everything else has always involved around education. And so my mom obviously inspires me as a teacher or to go into the field. But when I think about the type of teacher I want to become, I never had my mom as a teacher. However, I had the privilege of having Miss Deborah Logan, who I refer to as Mama Logan, as a teacher. And one of the things that I always hold on to, especially now as I reflect, is the influence and the impact that she had on my life when I was in high school, as one of two Black teachers that I had in K through 12 education. And just the amount of conviction and dedication that she didn't just have to all of her students, but specifically the microcosm of where I went to school, or the high school where I attended. There were not a lot of Black students in the population. And so she really was that mother figure, that nurturer, that puts you in check. There was no acting up. There was never going to be ditching class or anything under the watch of Mama Logan. And she didn't care if you were her student then or you finished her class and matriculated on through. And I hold that I hold that as one of the pillars that I still embody as a current classroom teacher. The first thing I always tell my students is, once you're my student, you are always my student. And I learned that not just from my mom, but I learned that firsthand from always, still, even as an adult, still Mama Logan student. And I credit her to the type of environment that I create in my classroom now. I credit her to the type of teacher that I am now. And I credit her to the type of experience that I want students to walk away from when they finish being one of my students.
Undoubtedly a huge impact. Even those of you on the call may not know, Mrs. Logan was also my teacher as well, which is why I struggle with even calling her Deborah. Probably will never call her Deborah, even though we have teachers that encourage you to call them by your first name when you're a grown adult. Yeah, not happening. Still calling her Mrs. Logan. But for Megan, I want you to continue to kind of expound on the joys of education. I know you kind of mentioned your early start and a young career, but we have such a heavy word in today's topic, burden, but we know that there's some triumph and joys in being an educator. Can you elaborate on some of that?
I can. So, one of the things that I have learned is that regardless of socioeconomic status, cultural background, like, all students, all children deserve good teachers. And I say that specifically because I've experienced two types of joy as an educator. So prior to returning back to ABC Unified School District, I worked where my heart truly was, which I worked in what some would call the hood or the inner cities, because I knew the type of educational privilege that I was provided with. And I knew that I learned quickly when I got to Cal State Long Beach that it was a privilege, right? Not everyone had the same opportunity that I had. And so one of the joys that I've experienced as a teacher is empowering students who education and their dedication to their academic progress is going to be their ticket to breaking generational curses. Their education is going to be the ticket to not only uplifting themselves, but uplifting their family, uplifting their community. They're fostering a love for learning in students in marginalized groups and underserved populations is allowing them to see beyond what their current reality is and to envision what their current reality can be if they keep being dedicated to that. On the second end, right, because not all students have that same urgency to I have to stay focused, I have to go to college, because if I don't, my future is not going to be as bright as I want to. But the thing I love is I love fostering a love for learning in all students. I love fostering the desire to advocate for themselves and to push things to the next level, to find and discover like their favorite subject, not just because their parents say it, or not just because, Mrs. Mitchell loves history. So of course the history lessons are always going to be on fire, right? But I love to see them really take ownership of their academic journey and just blossom, right? Like, you have being a teacher gives you a first row seat to watching someone's growth, watching someone's personality, watching someone's acquisition of life skills and knowledge like unfold. It's almost like you are watching all these different Academy Awards, award-winning films and pictures develop right in front of your eyes. And there is no other career, there is no other field where you were able to see that and see it so rapidly and continuously.
What a descriptive for evolution, just the power of that you hold as an educator, seeing your students' evolution, even seeing your own, Megan, as an educator through that process. Mrs. Logan, there's been so many different aspects of the educational and community realm that you've been involved in as an educator. What are some joys that you've experienced?
Well, my joy is right here in front of me. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at Megan. I'm looking at Stephen. And I'm in contact with so many of my students over the years. Even the students I had my first year of teaching in Compton, I'm still in contact with a lot of those students. And so my joy is seeing how successful all of my students have become, seeing how they all found their passions and they're doing what they enjoy doing, and that so many of them are giving back to the community. That's my joy. You know, you don't know a lot of times the impact you make on people's lives. And then later on, you learn, oh, wow, I'm doing this because I remember you telling me that my parents wanted me to do this, but this is what I wanted to do. And you told me to do what's in my heart. And so I'm looking at my joy right now. I'm looking at all these amazing young adults doing great things. And so that's been my joy in education. And when people, think, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be in business because of the money. It was never about the money. It's always been about just seeing kids happy and joyful. And even when I was down, kids always brought me up. So that's my joy. Looking at you guys are my joy.
I love it and appreciate that, Mrs. Logan. You know we love you. Come back to school many a years just to visit Mrs. Logan because of her impact. And for Dr. Wise, even your joy, just thinking about it for everyone on the call, no matter where you are in your professional space as an educator or administrator, Dr. Wise, you may have even experienced joys in different aspects of your evolution professionally. Can we hear more about that?
I am a product of parents from the 60s and 70s. And so advocacy has been on the forefront of all of our conversations throughout my life. And so one of the things I'm most proud of in this work in education is that energy that we bring to bringing our own stories to education. So my dad used to have this quote, and it sounded like this: you either lead, you either follow, or you just get out of the way. Right. And so the joy that I've been able to have in education is really about fulfilling, number one, my grandmother's legacy for education, that we were able to bring that back to not just, but for generations. So even in the community in which I've served, I've been in Compton, Inglewood, ABC, Paramount, but coming here, because I believe that we've been able to be a good filter and a good source of positivity, to be a face of a Black woman that is proud and giving back to the community. So I really think of the work that we do in education as being that work of really being advocacy. And so one of the things that brings me the most joy, and I really feel that I chose the route of leading, because if we look at our students and demographics, in particularly about how education has been for or against or promoted or supported or not supported, we have a tremendous role. So when I was the principal here in ABC, we were able to think about these books. And so back in my day, every book that we had, from Watson's Go to Birmingham to Tom Sawyer, these novels that we had selected all told about this Black pain stories. And I felt like there was going to be more than that to the stories. There were far more open, better, newer instructional lenses. So we were able to change the curriculum at that school, and to guarantee that on my watch, no child would be in a situation where we had to explain the N-word because of a novel that we had read. And that was kind of my experience. I've been able to bring joy to my career, saying that I did solve that at that school for those kids, that during that time, those kids didn't have to go to the yard and explain what the N-word meant to other people or be called an N-word. And in essence, in that 7th and 8th grade year, and that curriculum continues, that we have eliminated the N-word off campuses that were going to be read in print, and kind of eliminated saying that the Black experience is a true experience, but there is far more robust and there's more to add to that experience. And so that brings me joy. I feel like the advocacy that my parents have taught have then directly affected my career and the trajectory of those students under my watch.
Definitely hearing an ongoing theme, advocacy, community impact, and in a very ethereal way. Educators always have this, and if the word's not humility, they always have a course of action that recognizes that the resolution, the task of being an educator is something that always is well beyond themselves. They're always supporting something or a bigger picture beyond themselves. It's not necessarily just limited to what's happening in the classroom. They know that the bigger impact is in the community and the children or the students or the adults that they're essentially training to be better humans and do even bigger things in the community than they were even doing. Recent data, Dr. Wise, confirms that when Black students have one Black educator in their matriculation through PK and 12 schools, these students are 13% more likely to attend college. Furthermore, when Black students have at least two Black educators, right, so representation, the percentage jumps to 32%. Why do you think, Dr. Wise, Black educators are so important, or even just representation, period? Women, right, is so important to the academic sphere in terms of development of Black students?
I think nothing is better than painting a picture that you can touch. And so I say that meaning that when we are educators in Black and in schools, kids actually get a chance to see us, touch us, feel us in positive ways that are that contradict what the media is projecting about Black women and for Black adults. And so one of the things that I pride myself is, and I burden myself with understanding that I play that role for so many people, and so many kids, and not just the kids that look like me, but kids that look different than me. One of the things that I think is, and why it impacts instruction, why does it impact? Because when I feel more comfortable in an environment, I do better. And so I'm convinced that the more diversity we can bring to education, the better it will be for generations to come when they can see people in positive lights or realize. I think the media is definitely not the reality of life, that the real Black women look and posture themselves and gesture themselves just like I do. And so media has a different picture that they paint of Black women. The second portion of that is that I speak their language. And so although people don't necessarily always agree with the fact that African Americans speak multiple languages, I do have a different language that I speak in my professional world as opposed to I speak at home. And so my language at home is far more casual than it is when I'm at work. And what I know is that when I talk to a kid that looks like me, that he perhaps can see his experiences in me, when I say, don't do that, I don't ask the question because I understand the culture that we understand direction, not necessarily questions or options as other cultures have been. So I think I speak a bilingual language that makes kids comfortable. I set good expectation that kids have merit or see at their homes. I think that is what's connecting us to school. I often hear kids say, Miss Wise, here go my test score, and I did it because of you, or I did it for you, which means that connection or that ability to find someone on campus that they think that their work is important to is essential. And if I could just take 1 second and say, if there's any profession that I love more, that is more honorable or do more for society, it is the role in education. And I'm sure hoping that more educators, because I'm looking for them to hire them. And I want more Black people to take on the roles of how do we impact our community. And I really feel like that's through education. And so just knowing that our kids need that bilingual lens, that cultural bilingual lens, and education that makes them do better in school, I think that's a profession worth having.
Absolutely. Such an amazing statement that you said, and understanding and recognizing that impact as well. That it's not just limited to the classroom sphere, but even the types of educators that are coming out of the classroom, that type of impact. Or even if you're not a teacher, individuals that are looking to impact the development space in education, right? Policy making, anything from even the safety standards within schools as well. The net is a wide casted net, right? Megan, this is for Megan and Mrs. Logan. Megan, what was it for you to see somebody, you touched on it a bit, like Mrs. Logan, having representation at a school where 2% African American representation, right? And that looked very different even from, Mrs. Logan's experience, her experience as a high school student coming out of the 60s in the areas that, she grew up in. So Megan and Mrs. Logan, what does that data mean to you as a former student, now educator, and Mrs. Logan as Megan's previous educator?
Oh, I want to say, when I came in, I wasn't going to take the job at ABC Unified School District uh, because I wanted to teach. In my mind, I was going back to Compton or LA and I was going to teach. And my husband said, you know, you can make an impact somewhere else because, and so I decided to stay at ABC Unified School District. Um, I brought my kids there because it was easier for me, and I made sure that my kids always had at least one Black educator in their life. At Star Wars Elementary is Mrs. Davis, and she had both of my kids. And I went in and I said, my children will be in this classroom. In middle school, same thing, and then in high school. I think it's important for kids to see us. And that's why I think I stayed at Whitney. There were very few Black kids, and then there were very few Hispanic kids who came from the South Side. And a lot of times after that 7th and 8th grade, they wanted to leave. And I felt my job was, no, you're going to stay here at Whitney because Whitney's going to give you open a lot of doors for you just because it is Whitney. And, you know, you have to understand a lot of the kids who came from the South End, their lives were a lot different. And I understood that. And I think sometimes a lot of teachers didn't understand that, where kids had to work, they had to take care of little brothers and sisters, and they couldn't do this, they couldn't do that, they couldn't do after school things. So I think it's very, very, very important for kids of color to see teachers of color, to see, because they if they can do it, I can do it. If they can go to college and become back and become a teacher, I can go to college and do what I want to do. And I remember in my high school experience, I had there was one Black teacher there. She was an English teacher, and she was the one who helped us do our college applications, help us to go get into college. Our counselor never did it, never saw him. I just knew it was a name, and that was it. And having that one teacher there for me helped me. And so I decided I need to be that one teacher, if I was the only one teacher, to help those kids who are either Black, brown, or whatever, to do what they needed to do and go further ahead.
And for context for our audience members, just a little bit of data. Mrs. Logan retired coming out of a school that is a top performer, not just in the state of California, but in the entire nation. It constantly teeters between the top 15 schools in the nation, and arguably is very competitive at being the top 3, bouncing back between first and second and third place within the state of California. So that gives you some additional context in the type of educational space that she was in, and on the demographics, you know, 60% Asian. So when she's verbalizing that intentionality behind her students, Hispanic students, Latinx students, Black students, there's some intentionality there, knowing that there could potentially be some underrepresentation, underserved communities, not just on the campus, but in her actual classroom. Megan, if you wanted to also touch on that data.
Right. So for me, it's multifaceted, right? So I'll talk about my experience as a student, and then I'll talk about my experience as an educator. So as a student, it was very impactful, specifically at Whitney, to have a Black educator or have a Black teacher, because in the 90s, right, we lived in the age of affirmative action. And what a lot of people assumed was affirmative action meant that you were somewhere, or you got a privilege, or you gained an opportunity because you were Black. So attending Whitney in the 90s, a lot of my classmates and a lot of my teachers made me feel like I was only there, and I was only given that opportunity to attend that school because I was Black. And the one teacher who did not ever make me feel like that was Mama Logan. Was it 10th grade? I believe it was 10th grade English, right? And just some of the 10th grade is like a very pivotal year in high school. I feel like 10th grade is the second most important year after junior year. But the one thing that Mama Logan did was she made sure that she connected with our parents so that our parents then knew how to navigate and how to ensure our success in junior year and senior year. Was that a part of her job description? It was not. Was that a part of something that she was asked to do by someone? It was not, but that was something that she took on because she knew how her colleagues, I would say, maybe felt about Black students. And in hindsight, having colleagues of my own where I have to now correct them and I have to remind them that you do realize that I'm not here because I'm Black, right? I'm here because I'm qualified, and in most cases, probably more qualified than you are. And oftentimes, that I probably shouldn't have said that, but oftentimes, even as an educator, that's how we are treated sometimes. You have to wonder, were you a diversity hire, so to speak? And having taught in communities outside of Cerritos, having taught in South Central, like 54th and 4th Ave, right there, right in between Western and Crenshaw. The majority of my students were Black and brown, but the majority of the staff was white. And for my students, not just their socioeconomic experiences, but their cultural experiences were so far removed from that of their teachers that a lot of times my coworkers who had the best intentions were not empathetic and sensitive to the very experiences of their students, right? And so even though I necessarily couldn't relate to some of the experiences they had in their own communities, what I could relate to is having empathy, being a person who, as a woman and a Black woman, is always at the bottom of the totem pole. We're always having to walk on eggshells. We're always having to overcome burden or overcome barriers that people put for us, right? From the moment we enter into this world, there are certain stereotypes and certain limitations that people want to put on us. And so I was able to understand that in my students, right? I'm able to understand that this teacher may treat you this certain way because in their mind, their own implicit or explicit bias in some cases prevents them from supporting you becoming the best person and the best student and the best pupil and scholar than you can be. And unfortunately, no, I don't think anybody gets into education for the money, but even people that want to make change don't understand. Their lack of understanding and cultural competency of their students prohibits them from being able to completely and wholly support their entire student, not just academically, but socio-emotionally, but building those connections with them. And so for me, I want to, again, create that bond and create that opportunity for all of my students that Mama Logan created for me. And I will share a little story. So senior year was very interesting. I thought I was going to get into a specific school and I did not. And at that point, I was only left with one option. So I decided that I was going to go to UCSD. And with deciding to go to UCSD, I didn't get into the specific college. Like UCSD has, they probably have more now, but then they had six colleges. And I wanted to get into Marshall because I was going to be a lawyer. But I got into Roosevelt, which was their School of Liberal Arts. And so it was another counselor who convinced me to go to Cal State Long Beach because Cal State Long Beach was offering me a full ride as a presidential scholar. And so I made the change really late. And there was, in May, all of our senior class, we all wore our class sweatshirts. And we wore our college sweatshirts. So I was wearing a Cal State Long Beach sweatshirt. And another teacher, I was in their class, and he was perplexed because the school that I originally announced I was going to was not the school that I was wearing. And so he asked me, he was like, "Why are you in that sweatshirt?" And I was like, "Oh, because I'm going to go to Cal State Long Beach." And in front of all of the students in the class, This I was going to say professor. He was not a professor. This teacher proceeded to tell me that I had thrown away the affirmative action opportunity I was given. I was feeding into cultural stereotypes of mediocrity, and I was like basically a disappointment. And at this point, Mama Logan had moved out of the classroom and was now a counselor. And I remember I was a senior, so I, after fifth period, I didn't have a sixth period, and I didn't feel like going to softball practice because I was humiliated. And I went up to her office and she said, "He said what?" And then I was like, "This is what he said, and this is how I feel." And she said, "Oh, no. I have had it with this. I've had it. I'm not playing these games with this man." And she's left. So next thing I know, she comes back with another teacher, Mr. Bohannon, who also is super instrumental and impactful as my role as an educator. And they asked me to repeat the story. And then when I repeated the story, they were both gone. And all I knew was I was walking out of the doors and I could hear Mr. Bohannon yelling at the teacher. And I could see Mama Logan behind him like, "And yes, and this, and that." And they were going off on a colleague because they had it, right? But not just because they had it with him, but because they were standing up for me. Like, I wish I had enough gumption as I do now, because I would have checked him myself. But I didn't, right? And I felt voiceless and I felt powerless. And Mama Logan was that voice. She was that mom. She was that you're not going to mess with my baby, and you're not going to mess with my student, and this is not okay. And I feel like as Black educators, we have to do that a lot, because there are times now when I have to check coworkers, or that I've had to check coworkers in the past, because you're not going to do this to my baby. You're not going to do this to my student. And it comes from, it's something natural, it's something that's ingrained into our experiences. And if I would not have had Mama Logan at Whitney, I would have made it, right? Because my mom wasn't going to give me a choice not to make it, but I would not have left feeling as empowered. And I think my experience would have been completely different. And she was the only Black teacher I had at Whitney. I found out we had another Black teacher, and I didn't even know this lady existed until the summer. And so that just shows you how impactful she was, not just for me, but for like all Black students that had her. And right, like, we weren't only Black students. Like, I'm sure if you talk to the Filipino students or the Asian students or the white students, like, they all felt that way about Mama Logan. But it was something special, was something extra to know that when I say Mama Logan, like, she knows what I mean. It's not just a term of endearment that, oh, this is just a nick, or it is a term of endearment. It's not just a nickname because you heard the Black students calling her Mama Logan, so now you're going to call her Mama Logan. Like, she knew that she was my mom. She was our mom when we were on campus.
And I want to make sure, I know we've had such an enriching conversation already, but I definitely want to make sure that our participants have an opportunity to field some questions. But before we get there, I do want to ask Dr. Wise, who already touched on this a little bit. She gave us a bit of a taste, but based on your professional experiences, Dr. Wise, are Black educators really that impactful or important when it comes down to the academic development, or even do you one better, not just academic development, but personal development of non-Black students? Are they really that important to have in that space of being an educator or even an administrator?
I believe having people of color is absolutely essential for the success of our students. We bring voice to the students' experience based on our experiences, and so we set expectations for the adults in the building in terms of what we would want to have for that experience. So give an example, like when we talked about the novels that were read by myself when I was a child, that were continuing to be novels for my current students, which means that if I read these books were at least 20 or better in terms of age. I think Tom Sawyer is older than all of us. But the thought that we as an African-American or person of color and as a woman could look at the novels that we were bring in for students and bring that experience of why it wasn't good for me, and then be able to impart that in the instruction for the students that were going to be under my tutelage or under my watch, is a great example of why it's so important for us to have those stories. The reason why culture, when we bring all cultures together in a school environment, we all have a perspective, and that perspective helps us make better generations or better experiences for our students. And so I cannot tell you the value, I cannot measure the value of having other people of color, in particular Black women, in particular women, in particular Blacks, Latinos, to be able to speak to their experience to make a better experience for the generations to come, I think is immeasurable.
I truly appreciate that response. I've had several conversations with Dr. Wise, even though, about her impact, even though Dr. Wise was not director of secondary schools when I was on campus as a high school, even primary school student. Seeing that impact now as an adult is riveting. Even the opportunity for my child, who's only 16 months, but still planning, being in a space where if I ever want him to return to my hometown and be educated in that space, I have someone representing myself, representing women at that seat. And that is extraordinary and exciting. And not just exciting for myself, but also my peers, whether women, whether they're Southern Asian, anywhere, any demographic, Middle Eastern. I think it's exciting to have someone like Dr. Wise at the helm. And also want to give some homage to her senior, Dr. Sue, who is an Asian woman leading that school district. So women doing it, Women's History Month. At this time, we will take questions from the audience, and it might be best, even Stephen and Wendy, if we could just pin all three of the panelists. Folks don't even have to see me. Let's just get these wonderful ladies, and huge kudos to your responses as well. And if anyone has any questions, I think, are we having Wendy fill the questions, Stephen, or myself?
Will be Elise.
Oh, Elise. Okay, Elise.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. So it looks like Wendy said, how do the speakers feel about more Black, Latino, Asian mentor teachers for pre-service candidates who are student teaching?
She needs to repeat.
Did you guys catch? You might have to say that again, Elise.
Yeah, no. So, how do the speakers feel about more Black, Latino, Asian mentor teachers for pre-cert? Yeah, so I know I did. I'm the baby of the group. I'm still old, but I'm the young. I'm finished my credential program more recently, right? And one of the things that was so amazing, having my mentor teacher was a Black woman, and her name is Nichelle Henderson, and she's not just a Black woman, but she also is my soror. She's a Delta as well. She was born and raised in Southern California. She taught in Carson, and then now she actually is on the board of trustees for Los Angeles City College. And having her help me navigate the program, give me the true tea on what it was going to be like, having her, she just, I don't know how she worked her magic, but there was about 4 Black women within our cohort during my credentialing program, and we all ended up with Miss Henderson as our mentor teacher, our master teacher, and she just poured into us. She guided us, and I know that diversity and representation matters. Like, it is important, it is pivotal. Like Dr. Wise said, which she always drops gems, it is different being able to touch. It is different being able to have what could be a figment of your imagination, looking to someone that you aspire to be, but seeing them also look like you, knowing that you have some similar experience to them. In America, everything is built around the premise of whiteness, right? And assimilation. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes, even in our subconscious, I have to check myself and stop imagining people that don't look like me and start holding certain positions of power or having having a certain amount of influence. And so having that right in front of you is definitely key. Like, I think it's important for Latino or Latinx students to see Latinx teachers. I think it's important for male students to see male teachers. I think it's important for Asian students to see Asian teachers. So representation is pivotal to the development and the success of.
Anyone
I
else wanna
also agree
respond
with
to that?
Megan. I think it's very important. My student teaching, and I was fortunate also, I had two student teaching experiences, and one was a African-American teacher and one was a white teacher. And I'm glad I had the African-American teacher first because I learned so much from her. My second experience was a teacher, and they told me ahead of time, she's retiring. She's not doing much in the classroom. So here you go. And so I took everything I learned my first experience and used my second experience. And the one thing she wrote me up on is because I didn't say the Pledge of Allegiance. And I went, you know, in college, you don't say the Pledge of Allegiance. You just don't stand up in class. And that was the one thing she thought I wasn't a very patriotic teacher because I didn't say the Pledge of Allegiance. But, you know, it's at my second experience, I went in, I had to do everything, lesson plans, it's on me. And she just sit back and watch. So I think it's very, very important that you have teachers or mentors of color. I think their experience should be one of color and one of non-color. You know, I think, and I also think kids who are not Latino or Black should also have an experience of having a mentor who is Black or Latino or Asian, so that they learn both sides.
And how about you, Dr. Wise? What are your thoughts on the credential programs for underserved communities, for Latinx community, for Black educators, the importance of credential opportunities?
I believe that all that we can do to support one another, I think, again, it goes back to that understanding culture and putting things in context and people being comfortable with education. Because I have to tell you, you know, it is a lifelong work that doesn't start at perfection. It really starts as growth as a teacher. And so the first year is going to be very different than your 20th year in that role. However, when you have mentor relationships or have relationships where people are onboarding you to this profession, their ability to speak to your experience and navigate the other nuances in the school culture, I think it is really pivotal. So I think when I'm talking to Megan and many other African-American women in education, the mentoring role as they are onboarding into education is really about talking to us about the culture of education, or the work culture that helps us to be better in these new spaces or these new environments. I think oftentimes in education and any other professional field, there is a dialect and there's an understanding for each culture that we always have to understand, and also take our position to how we're going to play into those nuances. And so you can't be taught about the things that are happening at the water cooler by someone else that doesn't understand your experience. It is helpful and healthy for an organization to be able to provide that type of support. And so I know for me, starting in Compton Unified School District, I could teach a lesson with a pencil and a paper without a book, because someone else explained to me not only the curriculum, but the nuances of students, but also the nuances of what my principal would expect in a lesson plan from me. And that's only done when people have similar cultures where they can actually work together and speak other languages. So like someone would say, well, you know, based on this, you have to do these standards. But when I have the person that understands me, she said, girl, let me tell you something. Don't do this, don't do that. To me, that's a different culture, that's a different relationship than just dealing with the nuts and bolts of the work. And so I think it is essential that keeps longevity as well as a sense of a safe space when we are able to provide those cultural dual languages in the educational field. And so I think that that is essential for the work.
And I know we're really close to
I
time.
just
but
want to
really
add
wanna
one more
make
thing,
sure-
Jen.
Go ahead.
I just want to add one more thing. I think it's not just important to have that when you're going through your candidacy program. I think it's imperative to have that in your career, right? And so she kind of alluded to it, but prior to meeting Dr. Wise, I did not have a mentor as an educator within my district. And so while we're doing advocacy work to support students, she is now my mentor and the person who can pull me aside and be like, all right, let me tell you something, like affectionately, you know, I'm like, you're like the cool auntie, right? She's fabulous, she's amazing, she's beautiful, but she has game that she's able to spit to me to help me navigate certain areas. I can rely on her, I can depend on her, because what I'm currently going through, she's not that far removed from going through herself. And I feel like it's not just about having your master teacher look like you and have similar experiences, but it's also being able to, once you are in the education profession, having someone that you can glean from, that you can lean on and depend on, that can continue to help you navigate these spaces and be the best educator that you can be.
And Stephen, I know we're right at time, but are we able to have one more question? I think it's such an important question. Are we able to have one more?
I believe it's important to, yes, absolutely.
Yes. So Elise, if you could, I think Dr. Wise gave us a bit of a transition. If you could, if we have your time still for the panelists, Elise, could you share the question with regards to curriculum? We touched on the person, the body, the space, the educator, and the student in the space, but we really just touched the surface of curriculum. Do you mind sharing that question, Elise?
Sure. So it says, Dr. Wise spoke on this, but I would like her and the other panelists to please elaborate on the importance of diverse curriculum, specifically diverse materials brought into the classroom. What methods worked in your classrooms and campuses?
Jen, do you mind if I start on that one? Because I definitely have to go to another meeting at 1. So here's always been my thought about diversity in curriculum. It is one thing to make the complaint or make the concern that it is not representative. It is another thing to provide the solutions. And so for us at a school side, if we were able to create the theme, so, you know, we have our standards, but based on our theme at this in particular school, we wanted students to be reflective in there, to think about how to ask questions in 7th grade, and then how to advocate for those questions in 8th grade. That helped us design what course of textbooks we would look. So don't get me wrong, California standards and their textbook adoption has to be followed. However, what we supplement that instruction with is under teachers' discretion. And so if we're able to work together as a team based on some commonalities that we want to see across grade levels or across groups, we could answer those questions for ourselves as a school side. So I just want to encourage people to think about, not only do we present the question, we also present some of the solution so that people have some choice in that decision making. But again, we have to follow what the textbook adoptions in California say. But how we supplement that instruction is completely teacher discretion. And when we can work across a grade level, like all the English teachers decide, there are far more books. Like The Giver is an awesome book for an 8th grader. We thought we wanted more male protagonists in our stories, and antagonists. And so most of our novels went to encourage boys. We figured girls would read anything that was cool. But if we have more books that have males as the antagonists and protagonists, that we can better engage our boys in books. And so our departments decide that. And so then that supplemental materials were evolved or changed to accommodate that request for our students. And so I'm saying that the answers are amongst us as educators. The answers are in our room, in our books. I'm sorry, the answers are amongst us, and we have the answers. We just have to provide the options for a solution for many people that, you know, still question what we should be doing as a district. I apologize for having to leave. I will always come back to support education because I know for a fact it is the best job on the planet. So thank you so much for the opportunity. Jen, you're a wonderful facilitator. I'm so pleased to be amongst these beautiful ladies on the panel. And I apologize for having to leave, but thank you and God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Wise.
And I want to touch on what Dr. Wise said about selecting your own curriculum, because I was challenged quite a few times during my years of teaching about books. Parents even went to district office on me a lot of times about the things I was teaching in my classroom and what kind of materials I was using in my classroom. But I felt it was my job as an educator that kids realize they're very educated and great book writers in the African American culture and Hispanic culture and the Native American culture. And so I try to encompass that, all of that in my classroom. And like I said, eventually my department kind of picked up on it. And eventually they started doing things from other cultures, books from other cultures, and not so much the traditional white authors that classics you're supposed to teach in the classroom. So I think as an educator, it's important that you expose your students to all kinds of literature from all kinds of culture, because that way they begin to understand other cultures through the literature. Megan?
Yeah, for me, I learned from Mama Logan, and I say that because she was our English teacher, but this actually got me banned from using glitter in her classroom. But we did we had to create like a quilt. It was a project that we had to do, and it had to represent like our family history and our legacy. And it was the first time in school ever that we were able to like bring in our own culture outside of just like slavery and civil rights movement, but talk about like our personal family history and our personal family traditions. And it didn't have anything to do with a book. It didn't have anything to do with, I'm sure that we had to do a writing component to it so that it fit within the guidelines of our ELA standards. But I think it piggybacks off of what Dr. Wise was saying. While if you are going to teach in California, you need to adhere to the curriculum that's being provided. You must teach the curriculum that is being provided to you. I think it's also very important to understand what you are teaching. For me, something I did was I attended this Standards Institute. So California is a Common Core state standards state. And so I went to the Standards Institute so that I can learn exactly what the standards are. And once I learned exactly what the standards were, I was then able to create supplemental curriculum that adhered to the standards, but that brought in what I call my cultural studies curriculum. So every year since I was teaching, I came from teaching middle school to elementary, but I've developed my own supplemental comprehensive cultural studies curriculum. And it starts with just the bare basics of every month in the year in the United States, there is something to celebrate, right? Whether it is starting off with Hispanic Heritage Month, whether it is Filipino Heritage Month, whether it is holidays around the world, whether it is Black History Month. This month is Women's History Month. We also have Nowruz for our what am I, Megan, I'm blanking, for our Persian students. We also have transgender silence day in the month of March as well. There's Autism Awareness Month. So I find ways to not just highlight one facet of culture, but I highlight all of them. And I'm always finding ways to align the lessons that we're doing to the standards. So I did have a parent complain this year for the first time about holidays around the world, because we discuss holidays around the world, and a lot of the holidays around the world also include some sort of religious component. And one of the things that I was prepared to do, but I didn't have to do because my administrator supported this lesson, was I was able to tie it into our social studies standards and our ELA standards. And I'm saying, hey, I'm just providing students with the opportunity to learn and to delve deep, because next year in 6th grade, they're going to cover world history, ancient world history. And so they need to have an understanding that some of these traditions are stemming from ancient traditions or ancient world history or whatever, but because I knew and I know what I'm supposed to teach, I'm able to defend and stand firm in the curriculum that I'm providing with my students. And so similar to Mama Logan, my teammates originally were like, girl, that's a whole lot of extra things that you're doing. And then now my teammates, especially in this virtual learning environment, are using all of the curriculum that I've been using for years, because they see how important it is for our students to know that. The other thing I'll say is I feel like such influence and impact is put on high school and college students having some sort of anthropological or cultural studies like experience. But where it really is important is in elementary school, because if you do the work when the kids are young, then you don't have to teach them to be culturally competent. You don't have to teach them to start thinking outside of their box and exposing themselves to other experiences that are not familiar to what they're used to, right? If you start doing it in kindergarten, if you start doing it in TK, if you start doing it in preschool, then it is something that is ingrained in them, and you don't have to pour it into them after they finish their TK through 12 education.
Wow, wow. Well, thank you for that, Megan and Mrs. Logan and Dr. Wise. You had to go because she is, I mean, superwoman for our district. Thank you so much for the enriching conversation. Educators, students have been all through the chat, giving you all kudos. I'm going to hand it over to Stephen, but thank you for honoring Women's History Month with your experiences and your transparency. Thank you so much. And Mrs. Logan, for the legacy that you've transferred even to Megan as an educator. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Stephen?
Thank you so much. I want to thank the panelists. You know, of course, Dr. Wise in her absence, but we definitely appreciate her and her contribution. Mama Logan, oh my goodness, I can't call you by your first name, but thank you so much for what what you did for me way back and continue to do. Thank you for honoring me by being in this forum. Megan Mitchell, thank you so much for all the things you shared. You know, honestly, Jennifer, you have a gift, and I think you need to have a television show, not just a podcast. So I'm looking forward to working with you more in the future for some of these racial justice series installments. But thank you so much for taking time to do this. Wendy, thank you for organizing all this very important. Dr. Corrine Martinez, thank you for attending, and you're also my committee member mate. So I appreciate you being involved with this as well. Elise, thank you for sharing and doing the introduction, et cetera, and monitoring the chat. I want to just make sure that you guys know that our dean was here, Dr. Pavri. She was in attendance, and she gave kudos for everyone that was here as well as my department chair, Dr. Haviland. He was also in attendance. But again, our next installment will be March 15th. April 15th, excuse me. April 15th will address the educator's role in disrupting the school to prison pipeline. I think that's essential for us to delve into. It's going to be a two-part conversation, one in April, one in May. I just want to thank everyone for your attendance. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. And I can't stress enough that we need to stop Asian hate. We need to focus on helping and supporting our Asian brothers and sisters. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much to our panel.